Hi, I'm Steven, and I'm going to walk you through the process of which I make olive oil soap with raw cow's milk. So let's begin the process. First, I'm going to go over the tools that I use in order to make soap. So I start off by using an accurate scale, a handheld food blender, and a container which to pour the soap in. And I use parchment paper to make sure that it doesn't stick. As for the recipe that I use is something that I've come up with over the years, and I build it using soapcalc.net. And from there, I can build the soap recipe that I like with the characteristics that I'm looking for. And so right now, I'm building it based on an olive oil soap with palm and coconut, avocado, castor oil, beeswax. Beeswax is as a hardener, castor oil as make it bubbly. Now, as for the other things that I use, I'll use raw cow's milk. Used to use goat milk, but didn't notice any difference. Also, honey, water, lavender, and as for extra additives, I use jojoba oil and avocado oil for my super fatting oils. The recipe that I'm using calls for 17.15 ounces of liquid, but I'm going to be substituting 10 ounces for raw cow's milk, and then I'm going to be using, right now, 7.64 ounces of water. So this is what I'm going to dissolve the lye in. So right now, I'm going to pour the water into. It is really important to get the amount of lye in your solution extremely accurate. And the reason why is the lye bonds with the oil molecules and creates soap. And so if there's not enough oil, then you'll be left with lye and that can burn your skin. And so what we do is we leave about 6 to 8% extra oil over the lye. And so we use that as called a lye discount. My current recipe, I'm using a 6.65%. But when I base this off of, I start with a 2% for the primary recipe, 2% extra oil, and then from there I'll go, and when I add in my jojoba and avocado, that will get me up to the 6.65. So anywhere between 6 and 8%, you're fine. We're going to let this cool off for about an hour until it comes into room temperature. All right, let's just see what temperature that we're getting at right now. Okay, we're looking at 190, 200 degrees. So we're going to let this cool off to about room temperature, at least down to 100, because we're going to be adding ice cubes of the frozen milk, raw milk. And if it's that's going to cause another chemical reaction, and it's going to heat up. And we want to get this as cool as possible, because when we add the ice cubes, the fat and the sugars in the milk will start to cook and darken it. And we want to keep this as light as color as we can. I've measured out 2 ounces of beeswax and just melting it on a very low heat, and it's about fully melted. Once this gets melted, I'm going to add the olive oil. I'm going to do this on the scale. So I did measure out 2 ounces of beeswax, getting it melted. I've done this in the microwave too, but then it leaves beeswax stuck to whatever bowl they melted it with. All right, melted beeswax on the low heat. I'm going to get this, zero it out. And now we're going to be looking for 24 ounces of olive oil. All right, we're going to be going for 24 ounces of olive oil. There we go. As you can see, the beeswax and olive oil kind of cools the beeswax some, so I'm just going to heat it up a little bit and get it melted into it, and so that way it's not into clumps and it spreads evenly throughout. I'm actually going to go ahead and hold off heating it thoroughly, because right now the palm and coconut are going to have to dissolve as well. So I'm going to go ahead and measure each one of these out. The recipe calls for 10 ounces of palm and 10 ounces of coconut. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Put the avocado castor oil and right now the beeswax in. So off camera, I'm going to go ahead and scoop all these out while it's on the scale. And then once I read each of my marks and the solids are in, I'm going to heat it back up to dissolve everything. Palm oil is sold as shortening, vegetable shortening. And what you're looking for is the palm certified. There's a couple of them to find. Right now, sometimes you can find this in the Whole Food section. And at my local grocery store, I used to be able to find it, but now I'm having to order it online. So it's very, very difficult to find. So palm oil is what you're looking for. So it's sold as shortening. Now I'm going to be heating up all the ingredients that I have to get them dissolved while the lye is cooling off, and it does form a crust on top, and we're going to stir that up. And then later on, that's not going to be an issue when we use the stick blender in order to dissolve all this inside the oil. So, but before that, we're going to be putting the ice cubes in there of the raw milk, and then after all that, then we're going to pour it into here. So, but again, this is going to be heated up to where it's all melted. Then we're going to let it cool to room temperature. Room temperature is really important when we start adding the sugars in the milk. When you're heating up the oil on low heat, we're just trying to get it enough just to melt. So we're not really trying to get it above 200 degrees or anything. So I always just kind of have my instant read thermometer and just see what we have, because you really don't want to get it too hot. We're just trying to get it enough to get those lumps. And as you can see, the beeswax melted in there, the palm and the coconut are all dissolved. And so we're just going to let this cool down to room temperature along with the lye solution. And at that point, we're going to be getting ready our mold. And so this is what I'm going to be working with. This is one I created 3.5 inches wide, knowing that my bars are going to be about 2.25 inches tall, and 1 inch is going to be the depth of the bar. And this gives me about a 4-ounce bar when everything is dried. And so that's what I'm shooting for. And so right now, there is a method of folding the parchment paper to fit in. I have it adjustable, but in general, I'm generally going to get about 18 bars out of my current mold and size batch that I use. And I found that works great for me. So let me get the parchment folded, put in here, and show you what that looks like. Now that the parchment paper has lined the mold, it is time to place the frozen raw cow's milk, measure it out, and put that into the lye. So right now we're just going to measure out 10 ounces, and let's see what we get. Froze them into cubes, and if we need to cut one, we will do that. So there we go. That is pretty close. So we're right at 10 ounces. I'm going to go with that, and we're going to go ahead and put that into the lye mixture. Okay, now we're going to stir that up for a few minutes. All right, we're going to slowly just stir this up, and it's going to heat back up because the lye is going to react with the fat within the milk. And so this will heat up. And so we're just going to give it some time. And then once it's all melted, we'll add in the honey. So we're just going to give it time doing this. Also, the water or milk ratio isn't that critical. It affects the tracing, which how quickly the soap thickens, as well as how long you need to dry your soap for the moisture to evaporate out of it so it can harden and last longer. The two most important things to get accurate is the lye and the oil. Those are the things that you need to be extremely accurate on. The water, it's good to be accurate, but it's not crucial. at this point, most of the milk has been thawed into the lye mixture. And since we let it come down to room temperature, it is still just relatively cool. So it didn't heat back up, which is really good. It just keeps from cooking the milk, which I have done it. And let's go back, reset the scale. We're going to be putting 2 ounces of honey. And the honey will act as a liquid as well. And the honey will preserve the soap since it's going to stay in pretty much raw form. It's going to help the soap and the oils not to go rancid, because remember, 2% or up to 6 to 8% of this soap is going to be natural oils without any preservatives. So they will go bad after a year or two. So by adding honey, it acts as a natural preservative. So we're getting close to add this mixture into the oil. So we're going to let those ice cubes of milk melt completely. All right, now all the prep work has been completed of getting the lye and liquids combined, as well as all the oils. Now, this is going to be the step that's going to have everything in place in order for it to go smoothly. We're going to be mixing the lye and the oil together, getting it blended until trace, and I'll show you what that looks like. And then as soon as right before it hits trace, I'm going to add the super fatting oils, and we're going to have everything lined up because this is going to go quickly. So here we go. There's still a few little lumps in here in the lye milk solution. So I'm going to hit it with the mixing blender before I'm going to move it over into the oil. And that's going to be poured in and then stirred. And then from there, we're going to be tapping the mixing blender. So I'm going to try to do this single-handedly. So hold on one second. Once I put it in, I'll make sure that there's no air bubbles trapped inside the blade. There we go. Now this is a really nasty mixture. So this is lye solution. So we don't want any drips on anything that we're going to be touching. This is why you want to wear rubber gloves and hand protection. But I've done it enough to, well, only cause slight problems here and there. There we go. So we're going to have that. Put that in there. Let me get this one out of the way. Then I'm going to use this a little bit later. Scrape everything down. All right. Now, I'm going to pour this in while I'm using the mixer to stir it and pulsate until everything is poured in. And then I'll be using the spatula to scrape down what's inside the lye milk solution. So I'm going to combine it all together and pick back up. All right, everything is combined. Stir it around and we're going to start mixing. Try not to get air bubbles into the mixture. For a trace is, see when you run the soap, the liquid on top, it doesn't leave a trace mark. It's starting to hit there a little bit. You can see it in the shine. So we're getting close. Trying to see, we're not at trace yet, but before we get there, we're gonna get the oils put in, and let's see, check our paper, and this is gonna call for 1.5 of jojoba and 1 1/4 of olive oil. So as you stir it, it's going to activate the lye and the oils, and they're going to bond together. So the chemical reaction hasn't totally taken place, and it's going to happen over the next several hours. But this is where the bonding, where they get connected. So, and let me sit here, turn it on, and we're going to watch it turn into trace. Okay, we're starting to get a little bit, starting to trace a little bit. You can see some of that in the glare. This is good enough for me to go ahead, put it on the scale. And it's 1.5 of a jojoba. Let me pause it. In my haste, I added too much olive oil. But here we're gonna go. I'm gonna stir this up and get this mixed in, incorporated. Move this so I don't knock them over. Try to stir and get those mixed in. See how it's starting to thicken? This is trace. As you can see how it's tracing, this is really what trace is. And so that's why we wanted to get those super fatting oils in, because it's gonna thicken very quickly and we're gonna have to pour it very soon. So doing this gets it mixed without accelerating the thickening agent. All right, one last pulse. Try to not get air mixed in with it. There we go. That is trace. We're at that point where we have to move quickly now. All right, let me go ahead and pour it. Let's see, starting to thicken up. And so at this point, try to tap it on the table. Get it to self-level. There we go. Now we can start adding decoration using the small whisk. Normally, I don't like it this thick. It makes it hard to level. And so we're just gonna go and see what we can do. Tap it down a little bit. There we go. I think this is it. Remember, don't touch any of the soap. It will dry out your skin. It's kind of similar to playing with concrete. If you do get it on your skin, go ahead and wash it off with plenty of soap and water, and your skin will get dry and you'll need some lotion. So it's not horrible, but it's definitely, you don't want to get it on your skin. So we're just about there. When it comes to cleanup, gloves is a must. So what you see here, all this will hurt your skin. It's not the end of the world, but it is definitely something that you really don't want to contend with. I have had it on my hands thinking that I just wash it off, and my skin did not like me for a couple of weeks afterwards. So go ahead and get the yellow gloves on from underneath the sink, and well, Mine are purple. All right, that works, guys. One of the things different about this batch of soap that I've made is I did not add any fragrance. The fragrance usually is added in when you add the super fatting oils at that time. So one of the things that this also traced pretty quickly, and let's see what our temperatures, we're at 91 degrees. This will have a chemical reaction and take place, and it'll probably get up to about 160 degrees. At that point, this soap will actually turn clear, and that's where it's creating the glycerin. And then once that chemical reaction is completed, glycerin has been made, it will go back to this opaque again. Color will be slightly different, but it still should be beautiful. The last thing I do is cover it with plastic wrap and then put a towel over this to kind of hold in the heat to help have the chemical reaction take place. You don't want it too cold and you don't want to get it too hot. So I just find covering it with saran wrap and then placing a towel on top and letting it sit really gives me the characteristics I want. If you leave it open, it can kind of cool off a little too fast on top and not have the chemical reaction that you want. So by letting it warm up, it's good, but you don't want to get it so hot to where it starts cooking all the ingredients. So it's a balance between it. So I just found this, and then with the towel folded in half or thirds and just laid on top, put this on a flat level place and let it sit for a couple of hours, and we'll come back and check on it and see the glycerin has formed. The other thing is you don't want the saran wrap to touch the top, otherwise it can affect the decoration that you put. Making soap is actually pretty easy. If you have an accurate scale and a hand blender, you don't even need a hand blender. You can just use a spoon and a little bit of patience. It's really something that is really fun to make. Just be mindful of a couple of things and you'll have a really good experience. There's so many different options and so many things you can do. What I've showed is a very complicated, not very complicated, it's probably one of the more complicated soaps, just because I'm using raw milk. Also putting honey, I'm putting wax in it, I'm putting a lot of things. You can make a great soap with just using olive oil, palm oil, and coconut oil, and that's it. That was my first recipe, was just using that, and then just dissolving the lye into the water, and then combining them. And then after that, pour it into a mold and wait. And so it's just something, can be as complicated as you want or as simple. So just the first thing to do, go out there and make it and see if you enjoy it. The results for me was just something fun. And when I've handed it out to friends and family, those who have eczema really discovered the benefits of natural soap. And so from then on, I've been making it for 15 years. I had a little eczema and it really helped. It didn't agitate the skin like regular soaps. So just go out there, be adventurous, have fun. Now, once you pour it in your mold, last thing is wait about a day to 2 days. It needs to get to a hard point before you pop it out of the mold and start cutting it. And then for me and my bars being 1 inch thick, it literally takes about 3 months to harden. It has a lot of drying takes place in the first month and then slows the process down. So it dries a lot, and then from there it just kind of slowly continues finish drying. So I would recommend wait 3 months, and I have some soap that's a year, and it's just wonderful to use. So best adventures. Let me know how you do. Take care.